And welcome to the special audience edition of Hannity. Now, this week marks the 5th anniversary of Fox Nation. Now, that's the place where America comes to find information on the hottest topics and to voice their opinion on the big issues of the day. And in honor of being a defender of the Constitution for half a decade, we are basing tonight's show around the most viewed and commented story ever posted on this site. It was the great, incredible Paul Harvey's Warning for a Nation. Now, back in 1964, the iconic radio host wrote an article entitled, "If I Were the Devil," and over the years he adapted and added to the dire prediction about where this country was headed. Now listen to the first portion of an audio version that he read back in 1996.
If I were the devil, I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, "Do as you please." To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, "Our Father, which art in Washington." And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills.
So was Paul Harvey in a way like Nostradamus? We're going to play more of his dire warning throughout tonight's show, and with the help of our studio audience, we're going to offer solutions. How do we fix America's problems? But to be clear, we aren't the only ones who believe something needs to be done to adjust the course here at home. According to the latest survey from Rasmussen report, 62% of those polled said that the country is on the wrong track, and only 30% believe we're headed in the right direction. So to kick things off, we bring in our studio audience. Let me put up on the screen one thing here. And it's millennials and religion. First of all, how many here believe in God, if you don't mind me asking? Hi, Amy. We'll get to that in a second. All right, all of you believe in God. Do you all believe in the devil? Does anybody not believe in the devil? You believe in God, but not the devil, Noah.
Well, there's something to be said for being leery of organized religion, which I think is what millennials would say broadly is what they find unattractive. Being spiritual and having a belief in something that's higher in an organizing theory, which is God, is something that's distinct from organized religion, which a lot of people have really serious problems with.
We have a poll, Noah, on that too, and it shows that millennials are less likely to believe in God. If you look at the numbers, 18 to 33, 58%. As people get older, they tend to be getting closer to the pearly gates, so maybe they want a last minute.
So maybe I'll get there in a couple of years.
Well, yeah. Is that a hint? I guess the point is, Amy, you say you don't believe in God. I'm surprised. I've known you all these years. I didn't know. Are you an atheist or agnostic?
I'm agnostic. I mean, I don't take any special pride in my lack of spirituality here. And I don't think you have to believe in God to see that there is something sinister that is going on in our culture right now, particularly our political culture. When we look at the hounding and the persecution of a man like Brendan Ike of Mozilla, and having these, absolutely these budding Robespierres wanting to hound him from political, or rather public life.
Wasn't Nazi Germany evil? Kirsten Powers, that was evil, right? Huh? The treatment of women in some radical Islamic countries is pretty evil, right? Yep. Rape, murder, pedophiles, are they evil? Is that human evil?
Yeah.
Is there spiritual forces at work there?
I think there are. I mean, I'm a Christian, so I think it's very hard. I know there are a lot of Christians that will say, I believe in God, but I don't believe in the devil. But Jesus believed in the devil. So if you believe the Bible,
cast out demons, right?
Yeah, if you believe in the Bible, I don't think it's the question of
what. I wonder if I can cast out your liberal demons.
It's a question of not a demon. My angel.
Yeah, your angel.
As a Jew, we do not have as carefully formed a notion of good and bad and the devil, but we have a belief in a Judeo-Christian ethic that in the context of politics and political life says that we have unique values, cultures, and life experience that makes us a beacon for the world and able to transmit to those who want to see and hear a pattern of how to live and govern ourselves.
But Doug, I would argue when Ahmadinejad or the mullahs in Iran talk about wiping Israel off the map, they want a modern-day Holocaust that would be human evil.
Of course they would, but I don't see them as the devil. I believe that what we need to do is to imbue in our culture and our values and in our political discourse a sense that we can be as good a people as the Bible says we are.
Sean, I think that there's an aspect of that statistic that you put up there that is sort of being lost. The real problem with millennials today in terms of their faith is not that there's so many people who are distrustful of organized religion. It's that there's a larger and larger portion of them who actually don't want to have any opinion on religion. I would rather there were more atheists who had thought this through, as opposed to the rising portion that we see from the Barna Foundation and others that have no opinion or think they have no opinion. From my perspective, that devalues the whole issue of faith. It just shoves it to the side as opposed to grappling with the real ramifications.
I have to disagree a little bit. I do actually think that a lot of millennials are very fed up with organized religion and with the church. And look, I'm fed up with them, and I consider myself a devout Christian. So it doesn't mean that they don't believe in the Bible, but they are tired of sort of the religious right and the culture war.
But see, when you dig into it,
maybe we're getting off track just a hair here.
The Bible into a political weapon.
If I can, Lauren, let me maybe put up on the screen. Let's look at the cultures. I think that Paul Harvey, by the way, I think the greatest radio broadcaster ever, and I spent an hour on the phone with Paul Harvey Jr. last night. We were talking about this and his father and what a great broadcaster he was. And look at the antidepressant use in the country. It's up 400%. If you look 1988 to 1994, 2005, 2008, up 400%. Now let's take a look at Miley Cyrus. Just one cultural icon, if you will. Twerking, okay? We'll put it up on our screen. You can see her over there and some of the videos. Has the culture declined? And is it related in some way to what Paul Harvey was warning about?
Absolutely. It has absolutely declined.
You don't look like Lauren.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
No,
Go ahead. Jump right in.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. No, it has absolutely declined, and Paul Harvey was exactly right. But what has happened in terms of religion's responsibility as a minister, I shoulder a lot of that responsibility. I look out there and say, what am I doing wrong? What has my generation of ministers and spiritual leaders or religious leaders done wrong? And we made a business out of religion. We made a cult out of religion.
But you're a pastor. You haven't done that, have you?
No. Well, it was headed in that direction, and 7 years ago, I left. I unplugged. I left my large church with stained glass windows and high-back chairs and organ music, and I started another church in a bowling alley. Because
so you get the bowl between sermons?
We were rolling for Jesus.
Rolling for Jesus?
Wow.
But you know,
every generation has had their version of Miley Cyrus. I think of Madonna, but I think Madonna was very different.
We're talking about, you know,
Miley Cyrus.
You go back to the 40s and 50s in American schools.
Message?
What were the top problems? We did a whole series on spring break. You were part of it. Some of you.
Chewing gum and
running in the halls, chewing gum, talking in class. What is it today? Pregnancy, drug use, alcohol abuse, and suicide.
Segregation wasn't a problem at all.
Segregation wasn't the biggest problem in schools in the 50s.
Now we have a new DSM-5 that has given us all these new mental disorders, and now we need to drug all of our children, exactly as Paul Harvey said. It's like he was clairvoyant. And so we're drugging all of our youth, and then we wonder why we've had this massive decline. You take God out, you take away their moral wheelhouse. They have nowhere to go when they have a moral conflict. They don't even know what truth is anymore, and then we're drugging them on top of it. What do we expect?
We're idealizing a time
Lauren, go
period.
ahead.
We're idealizing a time period and looking back on
honestly,
something
as a millennial,
that existed at the time.
as a millennial, I think it's really important to know that
Allison, go ahead. Remind us that you're younger than everyone else. Go ahead.
There, of course, are young millennials that are leaving the organized church, but there is a large demographic also that's leaving what they did not like and finding what they did like in religion, and that's right and wrong and structure. There's something to be said about this generation that was raised being told you can do whatever you want, there's no right and wrong, whatever, and then to see the consequential depression, the suicides, the pain that comes from feeling like there might not be a right and wrong and my life is not worth anything. So I think you have to speak to both and talk about why maybe they're leaving the organized.
That's a good point, I think.
There is, what's happening in American culture today is lack of personal responsibility. What we're, in terms of drugging our children, instead of teaching them about how to handle their emotions and how to handle certain problems, here, take this pill. A teenager gets pregnant, oh, go get an abortion instead of handling it. Parents aren't teaching their kids the way they used to in the 50s and 60s, and that's why what Paul Harvey said was so accurate.
Katie?
I would agree with that the personal responsibility is also an issue, but I think that we've also flipped in our culture the definition of of things and consequences for actions. So, for example, the anti-bullying movement. Everyone hates bullying, but when you look at these no-tolerance policies that punish everyone rather than just the person who's at fault, it creates this culture of everyone feeling like they're doing something wrong, but at the same time, no one's held accountable for the actions that they're taking. And so that happens in our schools, and it also happens with our parents. You know, a lot of people don't have two parents in their home, and that has been a big shift that we've seen since the 50s and 60s as well, leaving kids at home after school, doing what they want to, and having no consequences for their actions.
Stay-at-home moms now. 1 in 3 moms is stay at home.
But if I could address your comment that every generation has a Madonna, certainly the celebration of decadence has long been in American culture. But what I see that is so disturbing is that it gets younger and younger, that we are sexualizing little girls at younger and younger ages, which is part of why what's been happening with Miley Cyrus is so disturbing to so many people. And you don't have to be religious to see that there's something very wrong there.
All right, we're going to pick up our discussion, and we're going to come back and continue. Coming up, we're just getting started. We're going to play more of Paul Harvey's dire warning right after the break as our studio audience edition of Hannity continues. We're glad you're with us.
And when the band plays Hail to the Chief, ooh, that one is to meet you. Hope you get my name.
Welcome back to our special edition of Hannity, a warning for a nation. Now, before we bring back our audience, I want to play another clip from iconic radio host Paul Harvey's prediction for America. Take a listen.
If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions, just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle.
All right, before we bring back our studio audience, he's talking about divisiveness and families at war with themselves and churches and nations at war with themselves. Let's just take a little listen to our, well, contemporary political debate.
They really are kidnapping the U.S. government. It's only about 30 people on the wacko right. Why doesn't he just go at these people?
The Republican health care plan is this: die quickly. That's right. The Republicans want you to die quickly if you get sick.
We are for cutting spending. We're for reforming our tax code. We're for reforming our entitlements. What we're not for is negotiating with people who have a bomb strapped to their chest.
Damn right Dick Cheney's heart's a political football. We ought to rip it out and kick it around and stuff it back in him. Do you know what they're talking about? Like this right-wing slut, what's her name, Laura Ingraham? Yeah, she's a talk slut.
Noah, you work in the media? Are we divided? You watch every show? You follow what's going on? Are we really divided politically now?
Yeah, we're divided politically, absolutely, because it's been beneficial for ratings. I mean, we've decided that we're going to bifurcate along political lines, especially in the political press and cable news and what have you. But that's not necessarily a new phenomenon either.
In the old days, we used to have duels in this country, right? So maybe we've had improvement.
We did, but you had political papers that were all owned by individuals who had political axes to grind in the 19th century, and this is sort of a reassertion of a philosophy that was guiding political media back in the olden days, and now. You know, we're back there again when you have an unregulated media environment, which, by the way, is a good thing.
I agree with that. Yeah, Deneen.
Well, there's substantial divisiveness. When you look at the class warfare, the race card, the child card, the grandma card, trying to pit different age groups or individuals against one another, and then that keeps the message that is trying to be delivered to Americans, especially from my perspective, conservative, as they mentioned, personal responsibility, smaller government, less spending. When you bring in the other aspects of the arguments I just mentioned, that kind of shuts down the debate, and that's all you really see and hear with the headlines.
Let me go to Noelle, because you've worked like Doug in a lot of campaigns. We know what this election is going to be about from the Democratic side. Well, Republicans want a war on women. They want dirty air, dirty water. They want grandma to die and children, right?
You know,
that's why we should vote against you.
I really feel, especially.
You believe that? You really believe that?
What's that? That we should vote against you? I have so many more reasons. Republicans in general. I have so many more reasons than that, Sean.
Okay, go, Noelle.
Let me tell you something. As someone that actually works in campaigns and raises money for actual races going on, I've got to let you know that I feel like our country has been more divided ever since, and I know I'm going to be criticized for this, but ever since Obama has gotten in office, I think that we have had more division with races, more division with income, more division among women, gender. I mean, you name it, we are divided. And I think Obama, instead of being the first black president that brought us together, has actually divided us.
I mean, as another campaign hack, I guess, would be sort of what you call us.
Noelle's not a hack. If you want to describe yourself that way, feel free.
We fight in the trenches is where we are. We're always in the trenches. We're on the ground with clients, talking to voters all the time. And this division existed a long time ago. Even when Bush was in office, the cards were flipped and we were fighting over things there. And we've fought over this for years. Barry Goldwater years, Nixon years. It goes back. This is politics.
The problem is that it's no longer honorable to consider America above partisan politics.
Listen, I think a certain amount of it, I may be defending my craft. I kind of like passionate debate, but it's gotten personal. And it's also full of lies, propaganda, and misinformation.
And it's profitable. It's profitable. I ran a campaign, I was a candidate against a very unpopular, at the time, Democrat, but very powerful Democrat. And all of my consultants were advising me to attack. And I did on the issues, but I had to keep this, as I felt in my heart, I had to keep this civil because I believe that civil discourse is more important than political advancement.
But you're the exception to the rule. The president even said Republicans want dirty air and dirty water. That's what their plan is. Yeah. Yes, Miss Liberal.
The problem with that, proud of it, Sean, the problem with that is that I don't know if you won or not, but you don't win, and that works for both sides. Unfortunately, a real quick attack message is what works. It's what resonates. To try to go into a long explanation is a lot more difficult for people to get in a real quick ad. So when you try to go on the high road, a lot of times you lose.
Let me bring Todd Starnes in here. Todd, Paul Harvey talked about drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors in every schoolhouse. Guess what we have in a lot of inner-city schools today? Drug-sniffing dogs, metal detectors before they get in school.
The one thing we don't have in public schools is God. We have seen over the past 20, 30 years a concerted effort to remove the Judeo-Christian values out of the public arena, and it has accelerated over the past 5 years. I wish someone in the Obama administration could explain to the nation why our military personnel are being taught that evangelical Christians and Roman Catholics are examples of religious extremists. I wonder if they could explain.
According to whom?
According to official documents, training documents that I have in my office. If you'd like to see them, I'd be more than happy to share them.
Written by whom?
Written by our government. Our government. Why are they doing that, Sean? Why is this administration? Why did this?
Yeah.
Well. For example, hold on just a moment.
By the way, you're surrounded. You sort of got stereo liberalism right there in the back. Go ahead.
But here's the question. Well, another item here, folks. The first Christmas in the White House, and this is documented by the New York Times. President Obama, and it was just mentioned, so I bring this up. President Obama had a debate over whether or not to remove the nativity scene from the White House, lest it offend people at Christmas time.
I don't think government's responsible. I don't think government should be responsible for religion in this country. I think that we should keep that amongst our families. A lot of the things that we see about millennials.
What is your fear, Erica? Is your fear a theocracy? Because up until the 60 and 61 decisions by the Supreme Court, prayer was happening regularly, Bible study was happening regularly, the Lord's Prayer was said regularly in public schools. We never built a theocracy in all those years. We survived. I disagree with those court decisions, and I actually believe in choice in education. What is your fear if you mention God in school?
I'm not afraid of a theocracy at all. I'm afraid that my personal faith is between me and God, and that I would like to keep it that way. I don't feel that an institution, that the government, should be interfering in my relationship with God, and that's just point blank.
Don't we indoctrinate kids about values about the environment and Earth, and that we're destroying the planet?
Correctness theocracy, and the thing that liberals don't want to accept is that the real truth truth actually works. The psychology here is astounding. If you think about,
by the way, this is Dr. Gina Loudon.
we went from a culture where I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and the fact of the matter is that when you have someone who's suicidal, for example, and you're a mental health professional, the first thing you tell them to do, what? Go help somebody else. We've lost that. Instead of I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Sean, now it's I should get a trophy for doing absolutely nothing.
You participated. You showed up. You deserve a trophy.
Showed up.
First place.
Yes, exactly.
Right, we got to take a break. We'll come back and we'll have a lot more. Paul Harvey's warning for Nation Plus, a discussion about how the Tea Party can help turn the country around, as our studio audience edition of Hannity with Kirsten Powers, special guest, continues. And welcome back to Hannity and the special edition and Warning for a Nation. Now let's listen to the final part of Paul Harvey's message to the country.
If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. Paul Harvey. Good day.
All right, before we bring back our studio audience, think of what he said. I take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. Well, let's listen to President Obama when he talks about fair share, income, inequality he often mentions. Listen to this.
If everybody is getting a fair shot, everybody has a chance to do better. We can build an economy that gives everybody a fair shot.
When we talk about everybody paying their fair share, Americans who can afford it should pay their fair share.
Fair play and shared responsibility. I think that's a fair approach. Americans who can't afford it should pay their fair share.
Fair play and shared responsibility, that's what we're about.
The Buffett rule is something that will get us moving in the right direction towards fairness. And so it's time for Congress to stand up for the middle class and make our tax system fairer.
We've got to make sure that we've got a tax system that reflects everybody doing their fair share.
Or are we better off when everybody gets a fair shot?
Then remember what Joe Biden said about women. They're stuck in dead-end jobs. Well, who's going to pay for their health insurance? Well, that would be you. Remember this comment.
This is about freedom. How many of you are single women with children in a dead-end job? You're there because of your health insurance. You would rather have the opportunity to spend the next couple years with your child till they get, if that was your choice, till they get into primary school. You're now trapped in that job because if you leave, you lose your health insurance. Now, you'll be able to make an independent choice.
All right, take from those who have and give to those who want it until we take away the incentive of the ambitious. Oh, that's sort of like New York after you pay federal, state, local, sales, property, and every other tax. 3 cents of every dollar goes to the government, Judith. Sounds like Paul Harvey is Nostradamus. Forget about being the great radio icon.
I think what we were listening to from the president was a statement of equal opportunity for all. And I fail to see how equal pay for equal work and making sure that people aren't discriminated on the basis of race
where women are paid decidedly less.
He should indeed, and that was a whoops moment for him.
A whoops moment?
Yes.
That was a nuclear whoops moment. Yeah.
You know what's not fair is to be continually lied to and pandered to by an administration that thinks you don't know any better. You can't get the real information and figure it out for yourself. And I think really what we're all talking about here is important, and we're talking about Paul Harvey being prophetic, but I hope it drives people to action. It shouldn't drive them to indifference, which if you get out of the bubble, and people are cynical. People are like, it's too rough, it's too hard, the problems are too big. Indifference isn't the answer. Get engaged, get involved, do something.
Katie? Yeah.
I'm not sure how taking hard-earned money from one person and giving it to another person is equal opportunity. in the least, where that is completely wrong.
And when we
You can't take money from you cannot take money from one person and give it to another and say that's equal opportunity. It hasn't worked that way. We've seen it not work throughout history. Americans pay more to the government every year than they spend in food, housing, clothing, all of their necessities. You pay more to the government every year than you pay for your own personal life.
The fairness message is not a bad message.
Yeah.
And here's where that money goes that you're talking about from New York.
62 cents out of every dollar.
We send it to the red states through the federal government, who don't pay as high taxes. So they need the money. And hang on, I want to say something to what you were talking about before.
Hanging. Go ahead.
In the red states, and I'm from West Virginia, okay, so we're the reddest of the red. Highest suicide, highest obesity, domestic violence, incarceration.
You're getting off the point.
Lowest taxes.
You're missing the point.
Not at all, because those are Republican.
Wait a minute. Here's my question to you. At what point do you say enough is enough? In other words, X number of cents out of every dollar can go to government, state, local, federal, hidden taxes, and then you get to keep what you earn. That's what Paul Harvey's talking about. Before you destroy incentive and ambition in people, what percentage out of every dollar, how much should I be able to keep for the hours I put in every day?
Can we start with why do I have to send my money
How
to
about you
Mississippi?
answer my question? I asked you a very simple question.
As little as possible.
No, I want a number at which point you say that government at that point is becoming abusive.
Well, Sean,
No. Can I keep 50 cents of every dollar? Can I pay 30 cents of every dollar?
It depends on what services you want back.
Listen,
John, that's the problem. Is everybody wants Medicare. Everybody wants roads.
It's never enough, and you're not going to get the number from any liberal anytime you ask, how much more money do you need for education?
25-30%. Get rid of deductions, and you got an answer.
Let me finish my point.
Finish and just say,
by the way,
got an answer.
I am really getting afraid because Doug Schoen and I are agreeing a lot these days.
Exactly, because it's common sense. It's what all Americans want. We're not a nation of rightists and leftists.
Let Deneen finish her point, and then we'll go to Amy. Go ahead.
It's never enough. And the other point I wanted to make is Obama's redistribution of wealth does not work. And here's the other thing. He talks about a level playing field. He doesn't support school choice, which will benefit disadvantaged children, get them a quality education, and restore hope for their future. His daughters go to a quality school in Washington, but he's blocking the door for kids that really need a quality education.
Right? Amy, yes.
It goes far beyond tax policy. We now have an administration that is openly cheerleading for disincentivizing work. You played that clip of the Vice President Joe Biden. We also had Nancy Pelosi telling young people, now you don't have to work. Now you can write poetry or, you know, Simon and Garfunkel.
I'd like to stay home.
This is a myth.
I work a lot. Yeah,
we have spent $2 trillion on social welfare sorts of programs, and since the 1960s, the poverty rate not better.
But for the first time, we have public officials saying it's good not to work.
And what
Vice President. Amber.
Exactly what we just saw in those clips that you showed with Obama was him not speaking in reality. We see him taking some of these issues like the Equal Pay Act and running with them and giving false statistics, just like he said with the pay your fair share. It doesn't work. You're killing the middle class by making those statements, but unfortunately, that's what a lot of the American people want to hear, but actions speak louder than words, and they're starting to see it, and that's why his numbers are so low.
Last word in this segment, Katie.
Let's focus, too, on the incentive part, and if you want to talk about disincentivizing people to work, we can look directly at Obamacare. When you're not going to pay doctors what they deserve, you have liberals writing entire articles about why doctors are just whining because they're not getting paid enough. Well, guess what? Now 6 out of 10 doctors are retiring early because they're not going to get paid enough, and it's not worth it to go into that industry anymore.
By the way, I love the cowboy boots.
Yeah.
Or they're doing concierge service, right?
Well, that's the way to go, but guess what that does? That makes it completely unfair because only the people who can afford it are going to get good health care, and it's going to create a
the best doctors are moving away. We got to take a break. Pastor, we'll get to you, I promise. We got to take a break. We'll come back. And coming up, could the Tea Party be America's last chance to restore the conservative ideals that made the country great? Deneen Borelli, she went and spoke to members of the movement, got their thoughts. We're going to play that tape, much more as we continue this audience edition of Hannity. Don't forget, set your DVR, Hannity the series. We don't want you to miss an episode, 10 Eastern, right here on Fox. Welcome back to Hannity. All right, throughout the hour, we have been proving how relevant Paul Harvey's warning to America is today and how something needs to be done to change course here in this country. And one of the great last chances to right the ship could be the Tea Party movement. And our good friend Deneen Borelli attended the Freedom Works Free Pack Tea Party event this past weekend in Louisville, Kentucky, and spoke to activists about their concerns. There she is. Take a look.
What brings you here today at Free Pack?
Well, I'm here to listen and learn. I think this country is in a huge mess, and I'm just looking for solutions and some answers.
It's always a positive experience when we're talking to America about the blessings of liberty. However, you and I know that we run into obstacles, particularly among our own, when we talk about conservatism and, of course, the tenets of fiscal conservatism.
Not surprisingly, I am the only conservative in my family, so I've had to defend conservative principles and tell them what it's done in my life and attempt to show people how other principles are not helping them.
Pastor, it's interesting. By the way, great piece. Thank you, Deneen. Really appreciate it. You know what's interesting? Every word that I was listening to, the people that Deneen was interviewing there, those are all the words that would have triggered an IRS investigation with Lois Lerner. Those were the key words.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. I know about the IRS investigation, believe me. Running for office against a very powerful Democrat in New York, you open yourself up.
Who were you running against?
Charles Rangel.
Ah, if only you won.
Yes.
So you've been through it. Noelle, you look at all that's happening. Is the Tea Party the answer? Because I actually think conservative principles are the answer. And to me, it's simple. Lower taxes, greater freedom, tap our country's energy resources, stop spending more than you take in. I don't think
and also, one of the things is overlooked is the national debt. I mean, the more that thing grows, the weaker we are. And I think that what we're battling, and going back to Paul Harvey for this panel, I think that we are up against liberalism. And liberalism is basically a religion to its own. I think that it's a culture and it's a way of life. And I think that it's, you know, that's why we're so divided, because basically it's conservatism and it's Christianity versus liberalism.
Joe?
Well, I think it's funny.
You're a liberal. Go ahead.
Just a second here. Think about what the president was saying in the last segment. He was talking about fairness. I believe in fairness too, equality of opportunity. The reason that Americans are the reason, of course, we have income inequality problems, but the problem is, how do we solve that? How do we approach that?
How about free market? How about freedom and opportunity? How about capitalism?
Do we solve it with free market solutions that attack those problems by leveling the playing field, or we just try to skew it more and more, have government come in and try to offset the different problems that exist within our marketplace today? We have a skewed marketplace due to both Republican and Democratic policies, not just one party, and that's why there's so much distrust that we see in all these institutions.
So I think that's a very valid point. I mean, the income inequality is something that we have to face, and it would be great, and we could talk about equality if we all started on equal playing fields. But we all know that's not the case.
So what do you want to do? You want the government to level the field, so to speak?
Sometimes the government has to come in and say, you're being unequal. Look at segregation. We ignored this in the first segment, but segregation is an area where the government had to come in and say, no, you can't do that anymore.
You want the government to literally try and make it equal.
The government sets floors.
Democracy is our political system,
to
not
each American based on their need. From every American based on their ability. Is that your philosophy?
Sure. You can keep them.
Karl Marx that was his philosophy.
You can keep a floor in and a safety net. That's what Social Security is there for.
To each according to their need.
Medicare is there for. It's to make sure people can retire in dignity.
You are already on an exceptional playing field by being born in this great country. You have an opportunity to move out of any.
Todd Starnes.
Help other people. And we're not talking about the Christian nation that doesn't want to protect seniors and the poor and doesn't want to reach out or help uplift people.
What are you talking? Okay, hold on a second. Look,
we have $7 trillion in debt, and $17 trillion in debt, and $90 trillion in unfunded liabilities.
This administration
is
has
it immoral
done a lot
to rob our kids? Is it immoral to rob future generations?
Look at the numbers. No, it's
Todd.
Sean, we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. So if you take the Creator out of it, which is what the liberals have been trying to do, and they've been so far pretty successful, who do you put in there? If you take out the Creator, do you put in? Let's put in Karl Marx. How did that work out?
Apparently that works for him.
How did that work out? Where do you look? Back in the last election, election, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, in that arena when the Democrats tried to kick God out of the party, and then they booed God. Why do you think they booed God? Because there's only the Democrats booed God.
I was there.
Why do you think? Well, you should have been listening. My question is, why did they boo God? It's because they only have room for one deity in the Democratic Party, and the Almighty's not it.
Kirsten.
That's the biggest bunch of nonsense I've ever heard, first of all. Second of all, let's go back in history.
Look at me, look at
Let's
Todd.
go back in history and look at the facts of this wonderful time that you're hearkening back to, when Christians ran everything, when we had segregation, when Jews were openly discriminated against, where women were openly discriminated against. This is a fantasy world that never existed. It doesn't mean that we don't have problems in this country, but to pretend that somehow when God was in the public schools, everything was going so perfectly.
Wait, hang on a second.
This was one of the greatest evils in the country, in the history of the country. Segregation happened while God was in the schools.
But wait a minute.
So do not compare that to Miley Cyrus. You know,
I don't know where you're going.
The point is like the things that people are saying somehow, that liberalism and being anti-God and taking God out of the schools.
No, the point is that in this country, Christians are being told to shut up. Christians are being told to shut up. They're being told your views don't count anymore. It doesn't matter. Shut up, be quiet, pay your taxes.
Sean, there are Democrats.
One at a time, guys.
Sean, there are Democrats who believe in God, who know that what Kirsten is saying is true, and with all due respect, Todd, I'm a Democrat. I was in the White House. I push for prayer. I believe in God, and I believe we're all Americans, and we're not to be divided. We're to solve problems constructively. I can disagree with you, you with me, Sean, and we can part friends and allies, not be bitter. It's not liberals against conservatives. We're all Americans.
Hang on, let me just bolster Todd's point in this way. In the 40s and 50s, what were the problems in our school? By the way, before the Civil Rights, hang on, before the Civil Rights Act, before the Voting Rights Act, which, by the way, Republicans, Lyndon Johnson needed because Al Gore's father wasn't available. He was on the wrong side of history.
Conservatives were on the wrong side of history.
Listen, I'm agreeing with all those sins, and there's no excuses for it, period, end of sentence. But with all that said, the problems weren't morally as severe for all of America.
What are you talking about? It was segregation.
I'm saying segregation was evil, but I'm saying you're missing my point. I'm saying segregation was evil.
I will just note that none of the liberals here have spoken about conservatives the way the conservatives have routinely spoken about liberals on this panel.
Have you listened to Obama?
No, I'm not. You've picked out the worst of the worst, but I don't think these are the worst of the worst. And yet they're sitting there and talking about liberals as if liberals are causing every problem in the world. You know, and trying to
we move forward when people stop believing that they, as a group or a religion or a class or a race, have a monopoly on virtue and wisdom.
Absolutely
we move forward when we listen to one another as we do here and discuss. And that's what Americans
want.
We
haven't thrown one chair. I mean, this is really, this is not. All right, we got to take a break. We'll come back. And coming up, we're going to have more with our studio audience coming up. Well, there's some chair throwing going on back there. Right after the break, we'll continue. And welcome back to Hannity. We turn back to our studio audience. All right, so Paul Harvey makes this prediction. Does anyone disagree that America has been in decline? Who disagrees with that? You don't think America's in decline, Noah?
No, look around you. Look around what you have right here. You have multiple generations. A lot of them are very young, and we're very responsible and in touch and capable of managing our own lives, and that's what I see when that's what I see. I don't see a country that's in decline.
Look, I sound like a broken record. Pastor, are we in decline?
We are in decline, and let me tell you why. The greatest crime has been that we have segregated and victimized people who previously would have been, seen as getting a hand up. Now we have relegated ourselves to being responsible for giving them a handout. The poor don't want handouts. They want a hand up.
No, this is
and somehow liberals feel that it is their responsibility to take care of the poor.
I do not. 2 million Americans, the lowest labor participation rate. 50 million Americans on food
stamps. And that's exactly
50 million in poverty.
And what you saw in the last segment was the Vice President of the United States doing damage control over the issue of creating a disincentive to work, creating a negative force on the labor supply. And that was something that was greeted with revulsion from the country. They didn't say, good, we get the chance not to work. They said, God, help us, we want to work.
I think we can all agree on one thing. The middle class is shrinking, and the reason is the small and medium-sized businesses that fuel the middle class have zero confidence because they don't know what the policies are from the government. There's no. Why would they hire him?
The
Why would they
Obama
expand?
policies that we've seen over the past 5 years, they are the evidence that proves that America's in decline, especially with something that hasn't been addressed here tonight, is Obama slashing the military in every form. Like someone said something about they've been doing so much to cut the deficit on the backs of the military.
I agree with you.
We're slashing our military to make... No, it's not. It is completely factual.
It's a modern fighting force. I mean, we are not in the days of million-man armies that need to go out and they're doing on brute strength. We're talking about drones that never have to have a boot on the ground. These are this is technology that takes the place of lives.
Why don't you sequestration was created by Congress.
It is possible to celebrate this as the greatest country in human history, which it is, and that we all, of course, are so privileged to be Americans, but to also identify there is, I believe, social decay, moral decay, and a lot of problems that we need to address, problems that have been exacerbated by President Obama and his economic policies. And I would hope, Kirsten, can we agree, a liberal and a conservative, that it's a great country, but we need to work together to solve these problems.
Yes, I just want to say,
I think I don't think we.
foot of Obama, though. I
Wait a
mean,
minute, she was perfect. Why are you going to ruin that? All right, on this vote of harmony, if I weren't the devil, I would have the liberal and conservative hug at the end of the show.
The Christian and the agnostic.
Yeah, no, we're working.
My point is, you can't lay all this at the feet of Obama. Come on, you can't
I'm
say
not.
social and moral decay
this goes
started
back
under
well
Obama.
before
I mean,
Obama, but I think he's accelerated it.
I think we can
Hasn't helped the economy. All right, coming up, we'll have more with our studio audience right after the break. Straight ahead.